Right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you guys for showing up to today's workshop. In the previous workshops, we talked a lot about basics and fundamentals of tech. We talked about programming, systems, and networks. Today, we're going to actually get into more cybersecurity related topics. I know it's a little belated, but I assure you that the previous workshops helps really lead into the things we'll learn and talk about today, and helps us understand from a fundamental level what exactly cyber attacks can look like and how vulnerabilities really manifest themselves in technology. Before we start, we have a couple of announcements. This Saturday, we'll be having a pumpkin patch social at 2 o'clock. I don't know if they still sell tickets for tomorrow, but if you're still interested, you could go ahead and check out the announcement in Discord, where I think we have the link for getting those tickets there. I think we'll have Fast, Swift, Visa, and Wit there. So there's going to be a lot of people, and I hope I can see you guys there. Speaking of Wit, next week we also have a collab with Wit, where I believe we'll be talking about, I think the workshop slash meeting topic will be around imposter syndrome in in building your career in industry and school. So be talking a lot about the things that go behind the scenes and not necessarily tech focused, but still some important topics for college students. So hope to see you there as well. Okay, so the overview for today, we'll be talking about three basic things. The first will be different types of cyber attacks. A lot of the common cyber attacks that you'll probably come across and are still active in today's age. We'll be going into like a semi-detailed dive into different cyber attacks and how they work. Next, we'll be talking about some common vulnerabilities. We'll kind of quickly glance over those and talk about what vulnerabilities could look like. And I think more or less, we'll look at a vulnerability database and look at how vulnerabilities are recorded. But we'll also talk about like the general types of vulnerabilities that exist. And then from there, we'll quickly go over the steps taken for incident response and what that might look at a corporation or business. Okay, so to kind of bring all those three topics together, I created this like pretty basic flow chart where common vulnerabilities leads to the inevitable nature of cyber attacks from malicious actors. And from there, cyber attacks create a need for incident response. So the nature of cyber vulnerabilities is that no matter what you're building or what you're establishing, creating, cyber vulnerabilities will always exist. It's almost like a law of nature. You just can't avoid them. You can't always see them. So you have teams really figuring out and looking for vulnerabilities in their systems. But at the end of the day, vulnerabilities will exist on almost everything and anything. So from there, we have vulnerabilities that exist. People will always use these vulnerabilities to see if there's something they could exploit, or I guess what they could gain out of exploiting these vulnerabilities. And so this is just also similar to nature, but cyber attacks are just inevitable. They will always happen. There will be people, whether it's just standalone malicious actors, all the way to government-supported hacking groups that will constantly be firing cyber attacks towards any and all machines that they have access to. So it's really important that we have a certified team and incident response team that is there for us when these breaches and cyber attacks do happen to our infrastructure. So the overall theme of this flowchart is not if, but when. And when these attacks happen, what do you do? Who's there to protect you? And so on. So all right, so we're going to be talking about some common cyber attacks made by malicious actors. I didn't say this before, but when we're talking about the people who are attacking our systems, we usually use the term malicious actor or actor. This is just a more professional way of saying hacker or someone who wants to do unauthorized or bad things to your system or infrastructure for their own reasons or benefits or gains. All right, so I'll just be jotting down the ones that you see on the board, but we're going to talk about denial of service or DOS and DDoS, which is distributed denial of service. We'll be talking about man in the middle, phishing attacks, social engineering, password attacks, along with brute force. We'll also be talking about DNS spoofing and tunneling, session hijacking, web attacks, insider threats, Trojan horses, and ransomware. I know this sounds like a lot, but we'll be taking some time to go over each attack and how they work and what that might look like so that you have a good understanding of how these different cyber attacks manifest. And ultimately, cyber attacks intrude on what we like to call CIA. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, or availability. So if some sort of action or attack affects these three components, then they could be labeled as a malicious cyber attack. Confidentiality stands for like privacy or being able to keep information safe. If a cyber attack breaks confidentiality, that usually means some sensitive or vulnerable piece of data is exposed one way or another. Integrity is the idea that data or any assets that you have isn't modified by unauthorized actors. So if a malicious actor is able to change data that is being sent across from one network to another network, that would be breaking integrity. And finally, availability, which I think is the pretty much easiest to understand. If a cyber attack is causing something to not be available or causes something to shut down or break down, that would be intruding on that. So starting off with our first two cyber attacks, we have phishing attacks and social engineering. I think we'll talk about phishing attacks first because most people are familiar with what phishing attacks would look like. But if not, then I'll explain it to you. Basically, a malicious actor would send either a text message or an email or some sort of communication in order to grab sensitive data. This is pretty much all it takes to do a phishing attack. So the purpose and the method in which it's done could be there's a lot of different ways that could happen, and it could also be very creative as well. They're usually disguised to be from trusting or legitimate sources. And, oftentimes they include links that lead to malicious websites where it could install viruses or on a user's computer or gives attacker private information about the user. And most of the times, people who are phished don't realize they've been compromised, and it could lay dormant and unnoticed for a long period of time. All right, so moving on to social engineering, which you could say that phishing attacks utilize some form of social engineering. These attacks leverage human interaction and emotions to make a target act in a specific way. And during the attack, the victim or user is fooled into giving sensitive information or data, which ultimately compromises their security. Attackers usually research information about the victim in order to bypass security protocols or to get more general information about the victim. And the attacker gains the target's trust before finally manipulating them or getting them to do something in their favor, whether it's giving up sensitive information or violating certain security protocols for the, I guess, social engineer to get more sensitive information that they normally shouldn't have. So the overall, I guess, defense, or I guess, the overall line of defense for phishing attacks and social engineering is not super technical. Educating and giving the opportunity for people to spot phishing messages and to never give security information, things like that, and educating workers or just general people is one of the most efficient ways to counter against phishing attacks and social engineering attacks. Not super technical, but if you're able to distinguish what is a legitimate text message or email versus a phishing email, and to understand or be able to spot when someone is asking you for information that you shouldn't give, that is going to most likely be the best way for people to defend against giving away sensitive data. All right. Okay, so going on with our, I guess, more technical form of attack, we're going to be talking about DDoS and or DOS and DDoS. So to talk about just what DOS is, denial of service, this is when a attacker overwhelms a system and its resources to the point of breakage, let's say. This would be treading on availability in the CIA triad we have, because you're trying to take down a server or some kind of system to make it unusable and make it so that regular users of that site or resource won't be able to access what they want. For an example that could kind of be seen in the right there, but that's more specific to DDoS. A target site could be flooded with illegitimate requests, making the server users making it unavailable to server users. A DDoS attack is a denial of service attack, which involves a whole bunch of computers at the same time. Usually these machines are infected with malware and controlled by a single attacker. And all these computers target a single victim or server that's available on the internet. So you can see on the image on the right here, you have an attacker talking to a single controlling server, which is then able to communicate with a whole bunch of infected or zombie computers that then send requests simultaneously to the victim server here. Firewalls and other, I guess, firewall-related software helps prevent against DDoS because they're able to reject all the incoming requests from the malware computers before it reaches the server. So firewalls are super helpful, and there's a lot of, I guess, investment that goes around firewalls to prevent DDoS and denial of service attacks. Denial of service attacks are also used in a profitable way by hacker groups or malicious actors, where they'll basically sell cyber attacks as a service. And so if they have like a website to like buy a cyber attack, you could pay them money and then they'll use their resources to attack your specified site or location or server or whatnot. Okay. So that was denial of service attacks. We'll now talk about man in the middle. Man in the middle is also a very common type of cyber attack you'll see, where an attacker eavesdrops on data transfer between two machines or networks. As it said, man in the middle, the attacker is able to interpret data that's going back and forth and is not seen by any user, but they're basically hiding and being able to listen to whatever's going on between two connections, or between a connection with two hosts. The malicious actor that is in the connection can also modify or access the message before it reaches its destination, which means that they can either interrupt traffic, filter data, steal data, and alter data all at the same time. So if you see on the bottom picture there, we have a malicious actor between a mobile device and a web server. So by sort of almost not necessarily hijacking, but by listening to the conversation and the connection between the two devices, the attacker can do a variety of things, including impersonation and also stealing different session cookies, which we'll talk about later as well. But in the top picture, we have I guess, two different versions of man in the middle. The top one is data running smoothly where message A is going to Bob and message B is going to Alice. But because there's a man in the middle attack going on, the message A is able to be converted and sent different and responded differently by Bob or the server. I think there was a message in chat. Oh, sorry. I think it was a typo. I meant filter. So they could basically they have access to the data and they could do whatever they want with it. So they could only send the things that they want to send and vice versa. So, mhm. So two popular points of access when it comes to man in the middle is unsecured public Wi-Fi and installed malware. So if you have malware on your computer and you're sending data, the malware program is able to connect with the malicious user and send data in however they want, and the person or the attacker will be able to listen in. A bit more of a unique way is through public Wi-Fi. Because public Wi-Fi sends data through the air, you could basically think of a malicious actor being able to catch those messages from thin air, especially if it's unsecured and unencrypted. So oftentimes a man-in-the-middle attack is quite simple to, it's easy to have a man-in-the-middle attack when it comes to public Wi-Fi. Encryption on these access points, as well as VPNs or virtual private networks, helps fight against man-in-the-middle attacks and allows your communication to be secure, with no, I guess, actors listening in between. Yeah, and again, if anyone has any questions, please let me know, and then I'll go ahead and answer them in the chat. Oh, I forgot to use this. Now that I could use my voice. Okay, so next is password attacks. The attacker attempts to gain the target's account password to gain access to the account. This is pretty straightforward. If I have your password, then I basically have your account. And I could do anything I want to it as long as I have access to it. So there's different methods that I noted for password attacks. Password attacks could get very creative, and because passwords are so valuable, malicious actors and other security folks have created a lot of different ways to obtain passwords. And we'll be talking about that. So the first one is what I quoted as the sticky note. If someone happens to write a password on their computer, that's really, really bad. Please don't do that. But if you do have it, if someone in person is able to see your password on your computer, they immediately have it. Pretty straightforward. So that's like one of the most basic ways to do it. You could also imply social engineering for password attacks and try and get more information about a user's password through that method. If your password consists of some numbers or information regarding your birthday or other publicly known information, that would be more closer to what we call brute forcing, where you're trying to guess the password that a user might have based off of common things. If I have a password of 12345, you could try brute forcing and guessing that password. And what do you know? You get lucky and you have the account. So brute forcing is basically guessing the user's password, especially if it is not a very secure one. Next is dictionary attack, which is similar to brute forcing, but you're using combinations of commonly used words. So you would have a text file or some other file with a list of whole bunch of passwords and common words, and you would basically run some software to send requests to the server based off of the username and every single combination that the dictionary might have. And if you're lucky and if the user doesn't have a very secure password, then they might be able to find one of the passwords that's listed. This dictionary attacks oftentimes are combined with a list of the most popular passwords. Some people do have really insecure passwords of either like 12345 or password itself. And so it'd very much be used with that as well. Let's see. Yeah, if you have a password written somewhere, like on a sticky note or even, I don't know if like a password manager would be the same thing, but if you could go in person and yeah, I'm referring to like the actual sticky notes that people might write a password on. It's a bit old and I don't think a lot of people do this anymore, but it just goes to show how like you could get a person's password in different ways and different, I guess, password vulnerabilities could exist in a lot of places that you might not expect. Another unexpected example is a rainbow table. So you might, instead of storing passwords with the, I guess, actual password itself, you might do something called hashing, which means you would break the password into a different keyword that's really hard to reverse back. So if you have the hash of a password, or if a malicious actor has a hash of a password, it would be hard for them to trace back to what the original password was for the user. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much what the sticky note is. So this, I guess if you have a unhashed password stored on a database, that could also kind of count, but it's any place that you would just find the password written, compared to like brute force guessing and whatnot. So going back to rainbow tables are similar to dictionaries, but instead of just a list of words, it would be a list of common passwords and their associated hashes that people have computed and wrote down. So if they're able to connect the same yeah, you probably want errors in your password, definitely. But if you have a what do you call it? Lost my train of thought. If you have the hashes of two different passwords and they happen to be the same, that means you know that the hash that or the password that correlates with the hash is the password itself too. So even with hashes, if you use a very common password, it is most likely going to be unsafe as well. The final, more abstract method of password or obtaining someone's password is through a fake login site. If I send you a login site that looks like Google or Facebook, um, but is actually a site that I created, if you put in your information, I could then uh, program it so you would send your username, account credentials, and your password to a server that I'm running on instead of and then what it will do, it'll actually send you to the actual website too, so you don't even know. So there's a lot of different sites that have been, I guess, spoofed to look like real login sites that people might fall for and accidentally put in their information. So that is one of the ways people could obtain passwords as well. In order to really be wary and to defend against password attacks, creating a good password is the first and foremost method of being able to do that, either including a whole bunch of characters, special symbols, and capitalization. You'll be able to fight against dictionary and brute force attacks, which aren't able to necessarily go through each and every single combination. Um, at least not, at least not yet. So the second one is also implementing like a lockout policy. This is more towards the people developing the site, but if you have, let's say, a lockout policy for 5 attempts. So if you don't get your account password, if you don't log into your account in 5 attempts, it will lock you out for a specific amount of time. That fights against brute force attacks where the user has to spend multiple where the actor won't be able to have multiple won't be able to access the account multiple times, making brute force ineffective. So finally, multi-factor authentication, um, or I think it's MFA, prevents against account compromisation as well, because even though a malicious actor might have your password, they won't have the multi-factor authentication that you would have um, in order to get access to your account. There's more on that as well in different kinds of multi-factor authentication, but we won't go over that today. All right, moving on, we'll be talking about DNS spoofing and DNS cache poisoning. I'll mostly be talking about spoofing, but cache poisoning and spoofing have relatively similar concepts to them. So DNS, for those of you that don't know, stands for Domain Name System, and it is the server or protocol used to convert domain names to IP addresses. We don't want to be typing up IP addresses on our browser. Instead, we want to be just typing up really simple URLs. So Domain Name System converts the domain names like google.com to the IP addresses that they correspond to. So if you're conceptually with this system of domain name service, if we're able to change the IP address associated with a domain name, you could send the request to a different IP address, to a different site, even though the domain name system, even though the domain name stays the same. So that's essentially what DNS spoofing is. The attacker alters the DNS record to send the request and traffic to a fake spoofed site, which usually is similar to the original site, but has some alterations of some sort. The user believes that the site is trusted and legitimate because the domain name stays the same, but in reality, they're redirected to a different site where the hacker can either mock the original website or lead them to other malicious website that installs malware or other types of malicious software. Software vulnerabilities in DNS systems can be exploited for spoofing. So this is super dangerous because if DNS servers are compromised, the users that are using DNS servers won't know that they're being compromised, and also compromise many users at the same time. So this is definitely super dangerous, and we want to make sure that DNS protocol is secure from DNS spoofing and cache poisoning. The best way to do this is usually with up-to-date software. So if a software update comes out that patches a specific vulnerability, that's something you definitely want updated so that it isn't exploited in the future. You got some couple more pictures here if looking at diagrams help a bit more. On the bottom, we could see that the client accesses DNS, but instead of going to the real website, because the attacker injects a fake DNS entry, they'll be taken to the fake website instead. All right. All right, so next is DNS tunneling. So it's DNS tunneling is a bit more complicated in terms of the back and forth between the attacker and the user. But I'll try to do my best to explain it here. And it feels very similar to spoofing, but has some extra steps involved. So for DNS tunneling, the attacker registers a domain, and a domain name server points to the attacker server. So the attacker would hold something called a command and control server that they'll use for their own purposes. And that I guess DNS server involved will have an access to that server as well. The attacker would infect a host computer with malware, and usually these infected machines are behind like a company firewall. So if I send you a link and you click on that link and installs malware, I then have a little bit more access to the network that you're in, and through DNS tunneling, I could basically make things a lot worse. And using that infected machine, it could request to the CNC server that you have to install even more malware and to also create other issues as well. And we'll go ahead and talk about that. So the DNS resolver is a server that relays requests for IP addresses to the root and top level domain servers. And as mentioned before, the DNS resolver is able to route and query the attacker server, which holds the tunneling program. So the connection, once the infected machine sends a request to the CNC server, a connection could be established between the victim machine and the attacker And this is done through the actual DNS resolver. So it's the tunnel itself is what is installed on the machine after it is infected and requests to the CNC server. And the tunnel can be used to exfiltrate data and other malicious purposes, which makes it also the tunneling aspect also makes it difficult to trace the attacker's computer as well because there's no inherent direct connection. In the image here, we see that the infected machine sends a simple DNS request. The DNS request goes through the resolver and hits the CNC server, which triggers the tunneling program to be activated. And that's how the attacker is able to then access the infected machine afterwards. So, okay, yeah, that's the basis of DNS tunneling. All right, next is session hacking, which I mentioned before. This is a specific type of man-in-the-middle attack, more or less a type of man-in-the-middle attack that can be used for user sessions on a website. So the attacker is able to take over a session between a client and a server. The computer basically substitutes the IP address that it has for the client computer in order to take over that session. And the server continues the session without realizing that they're talking to the attacker instead. The server doesn't know that there's a breach because they're engaged in the trusted connection, and they already checked the IP address with the client to verify its identity. In the image on the right bottom right, we can see that the user logs in using their username and password, and the server responds with a session ID. So this is basically the server telling, okay, we authorize your account. Now we're going to give you the session ID to know that you are secure. If the attacker is able to capture this session ID, they could send it back to the server, and then the server doesn't know that it's someone else. It doesn't know that it's the attacker because it sees the session ID and knows that that session ID is valid. So it will continue to communicate with the attacker even though they're not supposed to have access. On the top image is basically the same concept with steps where I think let's see. Hmm. I think it also includes like the first step where attacker injects a specific script in the server, which allows information to be basically allows information to be caught between the connection. Attacker injects script. Number two, victim authenticates on server. Server returns page code with injected script. Oh, this is more or less an example. So I think we'll talk about this more later. This is an example of cross-site scripting where the server has an injected script that basically, when given to a user, the attacker is able to take the session cookie away. And so that's what's going on in the top image where the page with the injected script is given to the user. The attacker then gains the session cookie because of that script, and the attacker hijacks the user session, is able to act as the user. Okay, so as we mentioned, we're going to talk about cross-site scripting, which is one of many other web attacks that exist. Here we'll be talking about 3 common web-based vulnerabilities and attacks that you might see more or less like beginner web attacks that you'll see often here and there. So we'll just talk about cross-site scripting again, abbreviated as XSS. So legitimate or trusted web apps send malicious scripts to their user clients. As seen in the image before, the server doesn't realize that it has the script, and the user trusts the server enough to get the JavaScript or the code from that server. So even though the server is safe because it has a malicious script, it is able to infect the user. And from there, the attacker can get access to cookies, session tokens, and other sensitive data, as we mentioned through session hijacking. Next, we'll talk about cross-site request forgery on the bottom right. stands for, also abbreviates to CSRF. This makes it so the user performs unwanted actions within a web application where they already have granted authentication. Usually malicious code is hidden on the site and is able to run on the user. I didn't put too many examples of this, but one thing I found was a lot of videos have a lot of websites often include embedded videos within their website, which isn't specific to the website itself and is either a plugin or an API that allows websites to incorporate different videos. So all the videos that different websites could have could lead to like Vimeo or YouTube or some sort. If malicious code is able to run on these sources, such as Vimeo, the websites itself, even though they haven't had any malicious attacks to them, because these videos are now infected, the videos show up on these websites and are able to execute malicious code. A very simple example of what that might look like, but I think it's a good helpful like example to show what it means to have like cross-site, and how even though there's nothing actually malicious on the website, because of the different resources that incorporates, malicious code is able to be run, which causes a user to perform actions that they usually wouldn't want. Finally, we're going to talk about SQL injection, a very common web vulnerability as well. For those of you that don't know, SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it is the standardized language for database creation and manipulation. As we talked about before, databases hold a lot of information, such as usernames, password, and other sensitive data. And so SQL is the, I guess, tool or language that allows us to communicate with databases and to insert, alter, delete, and add data however we want. And so a website would use SQL to communicate with the database, and they would try to do their best to not have other users have access to this database and to restrict that only to either admins or just different endpoints that the user can access. So these SQL queries are commonly sent from the client to the database on the server. But sometimes users are able to inject SQL commands in user inputs that allow these queries to be sent and retrieve sensitive data that could either alter or delete data while still being unauthorized. So an example of an SQL injection could happen in any user input, where if you have I guess, say, input HTML element where a user can write in their username or password, those are places where users might be able to submit a SQL injection by writing in a specific way. So they would put a SQL code, but basically put something in front of it to omit or allow access to the database, and it would essentially run, and they'll be able to retrieve unauthorized and sensitive. They'll be able to receive sensitive data while unauthorized. I guess I forgot to include this example, but one way to defend against SQL injection is input sanitization, and making sure that whatever input comes in from a user is sanitized and is safe to basically use, and is not a SQL injection. The rule of least privilege also defends against unauthorized data access, but I believe that applies more to insider threats, which I believe we'll talk about next. But SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery are three very common web attacks and web vulnerabilities you'll see in the real world, and I believe, also are still active today as well. A lot of the times, even though there's been a lot of technologies that have been updated to defend against very common web attacks, legacy software and other non-updated tools or software that's used may be vulnerable to these well-known web attacks and cyber attacks. All right, so moving on, we'll be talking about insider threats. So insider threats are usually people within a company, uh, or, or working in a company and their open doors that can pose a special type of danger because they work at the company and have access to a variety of systems um, to them. So admin privileges that can enable people to do critical changes to the system or security policies is something that an insider threat working in a business would have access to. And the insider threats also have special knowledge of the cybersecurity architecture, threat management that the company might use. This could be used to gain access to restricted areas, make changes to security settings, or deduce and also figure out like the best possible time to conduct a attack. Uh, yeah. On the left here, we have just an image I found of three different types of insider threats. The first one is compromised, where a threat actor might have stolen a legitimate employee's credentials and informations and is able to act as the employee in the company. This is not necessary. This is a bit more from the malicious insider threat where the person itself is unaware that they have been compromised, and the malicious actor is able to disguise themselves as the employee in order to get more privileges. The second one is negligent, where the employees don't have proper security awareness or training, and they could inevitably misuse or expose confidential data without realizing. And the third and final type is the malicious type, where the insider threat is actively pursuing to do harm against a company's infrastructure, and trying to get more or using their privileged access to either get more privilege or to cause destruction on the infrastructure for their company. And so the best defense against insider threats is what we mentioned before of the least privileged rule, which basically implies restrictive access to resources so that not everyone in the company is able to access all the resources that are available. Okay, I believe this is the last slide. So we got two more vulnerability or types of cyber attacks here. So first we'll talk about Trojan horse. This is something that you might be familiar with. A Trojan horse is a hidden malicious program or hidden malware designed inside of legitimate or trusted programs. Uh, Usually Trojan horses are implemented alongside other malware and viruses, and they can open up and create backdoors on devices that allows hackers or malicious actors to access them in the future. It's basically placing like a quite literally a backdoor or almost like a portal for a malicious actor to access device whenever they want, whenever they need to. So usually the whole point of Trojan horses, as you might be able to infer, is to hide software that is undetected, that the malicious actor could take advantage of without the user knowing. Finally, we talk about ransomware. This might be something you're familiar as well. Victim system is usually held hostage until they agree to pay a certain amount of money or a ransom to an attacker. The attacker basically has access to a system and encrypts it with a key so that the victim company or whoever is ransomed is unable to access whatever assets they had on their devices. After the payment is sent, the attacker could provide instructions to the target on how they could regain control and get their assets back. But oftentimes as well, the malicious actors might just take the money and leave. So usually when you're dealt with ransomware, you want to make sure that it's dealt in a professional way by an incident response team, rather than, and it's not, I don't think it's really preferred that you negotiate with the attackers who created the or who sent the ransomware. So there's a lot of different not mitigation, but responses and plans, incident response plan to how to deal with ransomware, but it can be very devastating for a company, and they might lose a lot of money and assets in the process. All right, so that was a whole bunch of different cyber attacks. A lot of them are intertwining and they could relate to one another, but ultimately, those are the ones that you'll see a lot in the field. We'll talk a bit more now about vulnerabilities that might exist. So different cyber attacks and methods display like the bigger picture of how a malicious actor could take control of a system and break either confidentiality, integrity, or availability. But the way they do this is through vulnerabilities and by executing these vulnerabilities and weaknesses that exist on either a system or a person, because social engineering is very, very effective, especially to those who aren't well equipped or educated. So some types of vulnerabilities that exist is one is the 0-day vulnerability. So a 0-day vulnerability is a vulnerability that is basically brand new to the world. No one has known about this vulnerability, and it could be very devastating because the 0-day implies that people have not had the time to defend against or create updates for these vulnerabilities, which means that they're very active and dangerous for users. A cool thing about, I guess, vulnerabilities in general and 0-day vulnerabilities is that they're very expensive, as in they sell for a very high amount. So if you find a 0-day vulnerability, they could actually be sold on either the black market or some other places, and they're very valuable because of the amount of power they hold on devices. So government organizations are also looking to make sure that they find any 0-day vulnerabilities that exist and try to prevent any dangerous cyber attacks that happen. So they're very, very, I guess, powerful in that nature as well. They're also even more powerful when it comes to devices that are commonly used. Such as like an iPhone. If there is a 0-day vulnerability on an iPhone, that's going to be really, really valuable because a lot of people have that. And if you have that power, you could do a lot of malicious things to even greater number of devices that exist. Okay, is there a question? Oh, okay. All right. So next vulnerability is remote code execution. This is I guess, how do I say this? I think it's pretty much in the name where a malicious actor is able to send code as a payload onto a different device. And so it's not necessarily well, it could still be a 0-day vulnerability, but the malicious actor sends a payload that either consists of malware or other malicious software that is run on a device that they choose or send the payload to. The third type of vulnerability that exists is poor data sanitation. As I talked about with SQL injections and uh, input vulnerabilities, poor data sanitation allows for users to send data that might not be acceptable or even malicious. And without sanitizing or making sure that data is okay, it could lead to a lot of different problems. Fourth, as mentioned before, is unpatched software. So if software has a vulnerability, but is patched in a specific update, if the software itself never gets that update, it's basically pointless. That patch doesn't happen, and the machine or system with that software is still vulnerable. And so you want to make sure that you patch all your software to avoid those type of vulnerabilities. Not necessarily a vulnerability in terms of like the technical aspect, but still a vulnerability in that unpatched software could still be exploited to gain access to a network or system. Fifth, we have unauthorized access, just the general idea that different, as we mentioned before, different ways a malicious actor could get access even though they're not allowed to. Like an SQL injections could be example of remote code execution, poor data sanitation, but also could lead to unauthorized access. I guess the SQL injections don't actually give you permissions as a specific user, but um, and may not actually be, well, it could still be privilege escalation, but overall, it unauthorized access refers to vulnerabilities where a user has more privileges than they are given or expected to have. Next, we have misconfiguration, which is also a very popular type of vulnerability. Sometimes a piece of software is working fine and is working as expected, but a user using that software might configure something that is that might create a vulnerability elsewhere. So misconfiguration is also a very common type of vulnerability that exists, and you want to make sure that the systems and software that you have is configured correctly to avoid privilege escalation and unauthorized access from malicious or outside users. Okay. Next is credential theft, which I think I skipped over this today, but credentials theft is similar to gaining the credentials of another user. If you get, quite simply, if you get the username and password of someone else, that counts as credential theft. You steal the sensitive information of another user so that you can access their account and impersonate them and do whatever you want as that account or person. And finally, we have vulnerable APIs, which APIs, which stands for Application Programming Interfaces, are similar to endpoints that can be used for software or websites that allow for specific services. If these APIs are left out in the open for anyone to use, and if the keys, which is what is used to access APIs, are available to anyone and or are posted on accident, then malicious actors are able to get that key and then use it however they want to as well, which can be expensive, especially since APIs usually cost a specific amount of money for each use, making them vulnerable as well. All right, so that's pretty much the general vulnerabilities that might exist. So for those of you that may or may not know, there are many online catalogs for vulnerabilities that are written down. Exploits, vulnerabilities of the alike. So this is the CISA.gov vulnerability catalog, and they have a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that they store and write down that are also very, very recent. This one was quite literally yesterday. So vulnerabilities are constantly being found in the open and being written down and logged so that people are aware and that patches could be placed for these vulnerabilities. I think a common one was a couple of days ago. I think there was a vulnerability on Firefox, which affected a vulnerability on a specific feature for their animations and their styling. I saw like a cool video on it. And so you have that vulnerability written down here with the general description, the name, which is this, for this one, it's CVE 2024 9680. So you have other information as well, but oh yeah, you get like a general pop-up here, I guess, if you click on it. So I don't know, you get to this is the actual description and other information. Has different it also notes the different versions and what versions they affect. And you could get a lot of information on what these vulnerabilities do and what they are. So you could definitely check out what other vulnerabilities exist, but I'll definitely tell you now that vulnerabilities are prevalent everywhere. As said in the beginning of the workshop, they're always being found on uh, different devices, any device, and it's important that we understand that these different vulnerabilities, how they form, how they're used for cyber attacks, and what we'll get onto next is how to defend against them. So. I'll talk quickly about what an attack chain is. Um, looks like the bottom is a little bit too dark, but attack chain is basically the process a malicious actor might use to utilize a vulnerability and to exploit that vulnerability in order to gain more access to a target or victim system. So the steps include reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on the objective. So starting off with reconnaissance, this is where the intruder or actor picks a target and looks more into the target and tries to get as much information as they can that might help in their attack chain. They would look for specific versions of software that's installed and research any vulnerabilities that might exist so that they can exploit them and gain access to the device. There's, I believe, two types of reconnaissance as well, where one is looking at more public information and seeing what's just available in the public without intruding on any of the actual victim system. And one where you are like more actively knocking on their servers and trying to get information by directly pinging or requesting from that server to see what those servers have installed and how they would work. Next, we have weaponization. Weaponization is when the intruder develops specific malware designed to exploit the vulnerability. So usually when when you're exploiting a vulnerability, you would send a payload which includes a specific piece of malware. When that payload is successfully sent to the server, the payload then distributes the malware, which can be used to create a connection with the target server and the malicious actor. So weaponization is setting all that up and preparing for what is next, which is the actual delivery of that payload. The intruder transmit the malware, either a phishing email or another type of medium. So if you get a text message or an email with a phishing link, if you click on it, essentially you've triggered the malware that is inside that on the site that you are taken to, which makes the links really, really dangerous because they could take you somewhere that you wouldn't want and install things on your device that you wouldn't want either. So successful delivery is when the user clicks or accepts the malware package, which leads to the actual exploitation of the system. Once the malware is installed, it begins executing on that target device. And because you know the target device has a specific vulnerability for XYZ reasons, the malware will begin to run and install whatever program or malicious software on that target device. In this case, in the actual installation process, we can install a backdoor or other programs that are that makes the system accessible to the attacker. And from there, we also talked about command and control. The intruder could also gain persistent access to the victim through extra steps like we saw through DNS tunneling, for example. And the malware, which acts as the initial gateway to the compromisation of the system, could lead to a more accessible, more accessible damages through a command and control server. From there, once you have control of the infected device, once you have compromised the system, you then go to actions on the objective, where the intruder initiates their original goals and end goal actions, such as data theft, data corruption, or data destruction. They have access to the system. They could do whatever they want to the system. So that right there is going to be the general attack chain and is what the basis of what malicious actor groups and hackers use to target a system and gain access to it. Any cyber attack could pretty much be, tied to this structure. And it is important to understand the attack chain so we could make sure we have a line of defense for each, for when the attack chains are executed toward our systems. This is another example of an attack chain. I think it's the last one is the cyber kill chain. I believe this is more the cyber attack chain. Yeah. The cyber attack chain consists of three general concepts, which basically exemplify the same ideas talked about in the kill chain. The first one is perimeter exploitation. The second one is privilege hacking and escalation. And the third one is lateral movement and exfiltration. So perimeter exploitation, the first one is where you're actively trying to get into the first device that you have, or the first device of the target, and you're trying to see if there's an exploit that allows you to gain access to one device, one device or account, let's say. Once you have the access to that account, then what you would try and do is to try and get more privileges on the account. So you have more access to different resources that might be available, which is in privilege hacking and escalation. Finally, once you have even more privileges, then you could go into the step of lateral movement and exfiltration, which is where you can move from different devices or users and try and execute any I guess, actions that you previously planned as your goal. So that's also one way to look at the attack cyber chain, a cyber attack chain or kill chain. Okay, finally, for our last and third topic, we'll be talking about actual incident response. And to quote a line or description from IBM, incident response refers to an organization's processes or technologies for detecting and responding to cyber threats, security breaches, or cyber attacks. A formal incident breach plan or incident response plan enables a cybersecurity team or teams to limit or prevent damage. So it is crucial for companies to have not only a incident response team, but also a incident response plan and a set of instructions that will inform them on what to do without panic when a cyber attack does occur, which is I say if a cyber attack occurs, but you could also think about it as when a cyber attack occurs. So five key elements in incident response planning includes the incident response playbook, security solutions, business continuity plan, incident response methodology, communications plan, and instructions. I think that's, yeah, six. So the incident response playbook, this is the roles and responsibilities for each member in the CSIRT, which stands for the Computer Security Incident Response Team. This is just the Incident Response Team in short, for short. And it notes their responsibilities throughout the incident response lifecycle that exists, and I believe will show in the later slide. So that is the initial playbook that dictates who does what and how things are taken care of when an incident happens. Security solutions is the software, hardware, and technologies that are installed across the enterprise that either allow incident responses to be detected or other, I guess, incident response prevention, systems that we'll also briefly take a look at later. The business continuity plan outlines procedures for restoring critical systems and data as quickly as possible if there is an outage. The incident response methodology details specific steps that are taken in the phase of the process and by whom. A bit more of the actual, I guess, logistics that are put in compared to like the playbook itself. So this would be included in maybe the general playbook. The communications plan is the plan of informing company leaders, employees, or customers about the incident that took place, as well as possible law enforcement. Law enforcement may be involved during an incident report if certain devastating things happen to a system. So it might even trespass along that line as well. Finally, incident incident response planning also includes instructions for collecting and documenting information about incidents, and for what we call post-mortem review and legal proceedings if that is also the case as well. So incident response playbook overall has all the different actions to take when a cyber attack occurs on your systems, and acts as almost as the instructions as putting the fire out for when these things happen. All right, so I'm just going to be kind of jotting down the general ideas for the actual process for incident response. There's a lot of text, so I'll try not to read too much from the slides, but we'll start with the first step for incident response, which is preparation. This is ultimately the biggest step because it's everything that happens before an incident response occurs. So this would include preparing procedures, tools, and techniques to either identify, response, contain, or recover from an incident. This would include templates of what the most effective response is to a real attack. It would also keep track, you could also keep track of response times to establish metrics for possible attacks and to update existing techniques and plans based off of risk assessments that you might have. After that is what you could say like the first step. Preparation is like more or less step 0. The first step for incident response would be detection and analysis, where you would look at monitor a network and look at a network for suspicious activity and potential threats on a system. If you do detect a threat or something suspicious on the network, you could analyze the data and send notifications or alerts depending on those logs. And depending on what security tools you might have, it would identify incidents in different ways and also do different things based off of those incidents. The biggest thing to do in the detection phase is to also trigger false positives, which are basically alerts that trigger but don't actually result in an actual cyber attack or malicious activity. And so once that is accounted for and that you're able to detect an actual attack on a network, you could also trigger the communications plan, which alerts everyone that incident response or that an incident or a cyber attack is taking place. So next is containment. So the first step to actively fight against the incident response would be to try and take steps to stop the breach and the malicious activity from further damaging the network. This could include 2 steps. One is short-term mitigation, which is preventing current threats from spreading in the affected systems. So more, I guess, specific containment to a network. But it could also include long-term containment, which is protecting the systems that aren't affected by placing stronger security controls and protocols, which is something more related to the preparation step, but both are types of containment when it comes to infected devices. During the process of containment, you may also want to create backups of both the unaffected and affected systems so that you have additional data that you could capture for either forensic evidence and also for future study and or I guess remediation. Yeah. All right, so the next 3 steps that happens. So after containment, you have eradication, which is the full remediation and complete removal of the threat from the system. This could include removing malware or booting up unauthorized or rogue, or booting out unauthorized users from the network. Let's see. So yeah, that would basically be eradication. So once you know that you don't have any more threats that exist, you would then move on to recovery, where you would restore affected systems to normal operations once you're confident that the threat is eradicated. Again, this is really important to make sure that your system no longer has any threats that exist. Recovery could include 3 different things. deploying patches for your system, rebuilding systems from backups, especially if they've been damaged or deleted, and bringing systems and devices back online and in working order. Records of the attack and other resolutions are logged and retained for future reviews, which is what we'll go into for the post-incident review. So the CIRS team collects evidence and other information during the incident response so that they're able to look at it and learn from it later. They determine the root cause of the attack, identify how it was able to breach the network, and resolve the vulnerabilities for future incidents that might occur. Reviews on what went well and what needs to improve are also talked about during the reviews. And ultimately, the purpose is to strengthen the infrastructure and the team to fight against incident responses that might occur in the future. Finally, again, law enforcement might be involved in the investigation as well. So there might be a lot of legal back and forths that may occur during the incident response. All right, so we'll talk quickly about the technologies that are used during incident response. First off is the attack surface management. The ASM uncovers previously unmonitored network assets and is able to map relationships with assets. It automates continuous delivery, analysis, remediation for vulnerabilities and potential attack vectors that might exist on an organization. An EDR, an endpoint detection and response, automatically protects a organization's users, endpoint devices, and any access points that might be used by a malicious user. EDRs also collect data from all these endpoints and is able to analyze them in real time to see if they have suspected cyber threats and automatically prevent damages from the threat if it is identified. A SIEM, Security Information and Event Management, is able to help incident response teams it's able to alert them properly of any security events and able to display data in a way that is comprehensible to the user or to the team. And it is able to distinguish indicators of actual threats versus from a huge volume of notifications that security tools might create. Let's see. So next is security orchestration, automation, and response, or a SOAR. These enable security teams to define playbooks and formalize workflows during that they could use for an incident response. And they also automate portions of workflows if possible. The last two is user and entity behavior analytics, or UEBA. UEBAs identify abnormal or potentially dangerous behavior from a user and can identify insider threats, malicious insiders, hackers, or even hackers that use compromised insider credentials. They could also elude other security tools, which they mimic authorized network traffic as well. This is also usually included with other tools mentioned before and stated here, like the SIEM. Finally, we have XDR, which stands for Extended Detection and Response, which unifies different security tools, control points, data telemetry sources, and analytics across a IT environment and creates a single central point for threat prevention, detection, and response. Okay, so that was all three topics now. We will now be going a bit more into like the active portion, but I'll be showing a couple examples on TryHackMe. For those of you who don't know, TryHackMe is a website for learning cybersecurity, learning pen testing, and defense, and offers a wide range of sources when it comes to learning cybersecurity. So this is more or less a workshop for you to be able to try it out on your own, and we'll be going through a couple examples together. But especially from personal use, TryHackMe has been a very helpful source when it comes to learning cybersecurity and other beginner topics as well. So I believe making an account is free. They have some resources behind the paywall, but they also have other things that you can access with just a free account as well. And what I will be going to, I have a couple of like two examples that I was playing around with in their free roadmap here, which is in their learn category. So what you want to do is you want to go to tryhackme.com, go to learn, and you should arrive at the learning roadmap, and we'll just kind of take a look at what it provides and what's in store for us. A lot of the information on here is stuff that I've gone over before in today's workshop, like the cyber kill chain, but also from previous workshops as well, such as basic understanding of networking, Linux, and other fundamental technologies and how they work. So if this is something you're interested in, I definitely recommend checking it out, maybe even paying for premium to check out their other courses and resources that they might have. So I believe the first one, if I remember, um, hmm, this one. I know. No, this one is one. I should have pulled it up earlier, but let's see. I think it was the first one. No, it wasn't this one. Give me 1 second while I try and find the second one. Oh, do we have a couple questions in chat? Oh, no, never mind. Okay, I can't seem to find the one that I was on. Try hack me to master cybersecurity. Master is definitely a strong word. I think the only way you can master something is if you if you're able to practically practice it and study it. Try hack me is a good resource for starting cybersecurity. And it adds also a practical aspect to it. Um, but I would personally put them more in a, I guess, learning cybersecurity position. And it's a very good starting tool for people who want to learn more about cybersecurity, but may not be sure where to start. But they have a whole bunch of topics here that could really help you get a jump start on that. So just a quick example. I think we'll spend a few minutes on the website to play around with what might exist. But for here, if I open up the site that they have, this is just a simple example activity that they have for I guess for this one is like defining the kill chain for a process. So they have a lot of different examples here that I did yesterday. So it's not listed here, and the steps are a little bit different, but pretty much the same. We have reconnaissance, weaponry, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objective, which I think are actually the same thing that we had. So for this activity, you're just jotting down what the different steps are. So we could go ahead and do that. So if I remember correctly, the first one is let's see, we have weaponry for the first one. And for this activity, we want to choose a specific item from the list here to denote the step for the process. So for weaponry, I believe they put PowerShell. I could also check if it's right. Nope, it's wrong. Okay. Should have wrote it down maybe, but it's fine. Let's see. So you could go ahead and put some answers in the thing here. We know that for the last one, it should be exploit the public facing. Oh wait, I forgot. It's the Maybe it is. I need to check what the color is because I think that's how they check. Yeah, so it isn't red, so I think PowerShell is actually the correct one there. Next one after weaponry would be delivery. And so we're going to check how does the attacker deliver the malicious package. And here we have spear phishing attachment, which spear phishing is a specific type of phishing method where you're targeting like a more specific person, I believe. So if you go ahead and check that, that's going to be the type of method they use for delivery. Next, we have exploitation. I think exploitation. Which one was that? Okay, so exploitation is the actual vulnerability or exploit that a malicious user might use. I believe it's this one. Nope, it's not this one. Um, damn, I don't remember. Let's see here. Exploitation, delivery, exploitation. I don't remember which one it was. Okay, give me one sec. Or does anyone else know the answer to the step for one of these? Think we have exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objective are the last four. So figuring out which of these connect to those. Okay. Let's see. We try putting a couple ones. I think fallback channel, if I remember correctly, was the command and control. Yes. So that's that. Data from local system. Is that the okay, so that's the actual data that's being retrieved. So we're able to add the data from the local system. It's a bit vague. I think this isn't the best example to show for TryHackMe, but it's the one that I found um, to show. So once we go through all these different steps, you have access to the data on whatever target system that you were having. So I think the last two are exploit public facing application and dynamic linker hijacking, which I thought it was this one, but I think they're swapped. So let me go ahead and check that out. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just as a quick note, if this TryHackMe works similarly to like CTFs where it'll give you a flag once you complete an assignment and you're able to put the flag in the answer key and then submit it as so. So that's how the activities usually work. For TryHackMe, I think let's just take a look at this again. Installation. So this example is just showing like how you could utilize the different I guess parts of a kill chain to get information or access to a target device and practically what that might look like. The example is posted here. Let me go ahead and try a different one to show where it actually uses their box, which is a VM that you have access to. Let's see. Maybe it's here. If there's maybe one that you guys want to see, we could also check it out too. These should all be accessible as well to anyone. So, I remember seeing a specific. I played around with a specific one the other day, and now I can't find it. Oh, might be this one. I think it is a roadmap, but the roadmap is based on the what's available for a free user. So I think if you go to, let's see, learn, I've done a couple, or I guess premium roadmap, sure. This has some more other, yeah, specific things here that you could do. I've done a lot of these in the past, so it says it's completed here, but I think I unsubscribed from it, so I don't think I could access it anymore. Um, but you're still, yeah, it'll ask me to pay and resume. But there's a lot of different activities and information using both like their VM as well, which I'm trying to get access to, but I don't know where to find the activity that I was doing. Hmm. No, this. Hmm. I can't find it. Okay, we'll just try a random one for now. See if we could at least show the VM. This one's about Linux. So this is an example of what their attack box or VM might look like. It's really, really, really simple and nice in browser as well. So you'll automatically have your own machine to use for their activities. It's a bit slow, but it still works nonetheless. So let's see what the activity is. Oh no, it's just deploying it. Is that it? Oh, come on, it's gotta be more than that. Okay, you know what? I think this one's lame. I'm gonna try a different one. Let's see. Common attacks, maybe? Common attacks is a good one. Okay, yeah. This is pretty cool because this is common attacks that we were talking about earlier. So if we have, let's see, well, got passwords and authentication. I think we'll try that one. So yeah, so this is a more specific example of the brute force, and I think it'll take us through how we can how we can brute force passwords on a website. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so it takes you through step-by-step basis of what to do. For this one, it says with the generated list of likely passwords, copy the password list into the hash cracker. I think the thing on the right here is just like a small, simple application they created for cracking websites. So, okay, we found the password. So what it did here, after we put in the password, it got the hashes for each password that we talked about. And because we have a target hash that we were given, we just need to use the software to match it with a password uh, that is that has the same hash. So the password here, I think it was I forgot what it was. Is it this one? Try it again. Try hack me 123. So take that password, the exclamation mark, put it in, and then we get the question right. So CTF style, very simple, and but it provides a very good basic understanding of different cyber attacks and how they might look. I think in some other examples, um, it might use an actual like Linux VM, and you'd be able to use the password cracker through a console, which is pretty cool. So again, TryHackMe has a whole bunch of information and a whole bunch of different topics, not just including the cyber attacks stuff that we talked about today, but a lot of different cybersecurity basics as well. So I'll leave it at that for you guys to try on your own. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the workshop. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow at the pumpkin patch, but if not, well, hopefully I'll see you this Tuesday for a collab with as well. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next time. For if recommending free or premium, uh, I don't know. If you could try the free, and if you like it, you could do the premium and see how it is. Yeah. So I didn't realize this is Alex. Alex, right? Last month. Ing. Where's that? Where's that different Alex? Never mind. I might be tripping. It's fine. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording here.